Hello YouTube, De-bodgery here. Welcome to EV Components Review. Christopher has put this panic post out on the KO portal forum on Facebook. He won't put this anyplace public because, well, he knows that if it was someplace public, I would rebut him directly. Instead, he posted someplace where he has a canned audience, where he knows that I am banned and don't have access, because I would rebuff him directly. Because what he says in this several pages worth of stuff is mostly nonsense and spin, and he tries to make it look like I'm somehow or another the bad guy. And all I do is report on good hardware versus bad hardware. That's what I do. So here it is, Christopher Kleinschmidt at 4:38 a.m. posted in the KO portal. And there are several pages of this. So there you go. There's the last page of it. I'm not even going to go through most of the stuff because most of this is stupid. Yeah, as is typical for Christopher. So there it is. If you have access to the KO portal, feel free to read it for yourself, you know, where he's got his canned little audience where he can control what happens there. And, you know, publicly, I just post stuff because I don't have anything to hide. I don't have any smoke to blow. All I've got is the actual hardware that people make, and I show it off for good or bad. That's all I do. So, yeah, I'm completely public because there's nothing for me to hide anywhere. Christopher, on the other hand, nah, he has to post stuff like this where only his little crowd of fan club people can see it. Everybody else, nah. All right, folks. Oops, I am not quite done there. I have one other thing to do. So let's go back over there. All right, so the next thing I wanted to do was I don't want to take apart my Pro controller again, because I've done that a bunch of times now. So instead, here's a photograph of it. Here is the power stage on my Pro controller. So I'm going to zoom out just a skosh. There we go. Yes, you are looking at my laptop screen. I realize this is kind of amateurish, but hey, photo and video editing is not my thing. So anyway, yeah, that's my KO Pro power stage. And here is the Rush power stage. So the things I want you to notice is capacitors, exact same location, MOSFETs, exact same locations for all that stuff. Literally, they haven't moved like a millimeter anywhere. Yeah, same places. The thermistor has, so that's super important. So it was right there, or still is on the Pro, and now it's kind of like up above the connector right here. So wow, that's a huge redesign. There is this plastic piece on here because, well, these studs and these ones too, they shear off when people crank on them very much. And so they have reinforced it with this glass reinforced piece of plastic, which is probably going to help a good bit. I hope that the bottoms of these studs are knurled in some way so they can grip into the plastic. I know I've tried to lift this piece of plastic up, but it won't move. So, yeah, they're probably locked together in some way, and that's probably going to keep you from shearing these off quite as easily as they were before, because that is a significantly well-established, well-known problem, and I have said so without ever even seeing it happen. And then I get this controller, and it came with a stud sheared off. So here it is. Here's the stud right there. I got it with it sheared off straight from KO Moto. So clearly they still have the problem and have just put this plastic Band-Aid on it rather than fixing it for real. And they didn't fix it anywhere else. I still don't want to squeeze on these or this stud over here because I'm pretty sure that they will snap off just like I claim that they have everywhere else. So yes, they did put this Band-Aid on here. So good job, Christopher. Good job, KO Moto. You did actually fix one thing. And that's about all you really fixed. So notice all the little sections of copper strapping that just came off a spool. These little slots in here are not a patented thing in any way. They don't release heat. They increase resistance, aka make more heat. So yes, that is complete bullshit and spin that Christopher has been spewing since forever. Don't believe a word he says because those slots do not improve anything. They make it worse. So all they did, and this is the so-called redesign, taking it back to school, top to bottom. This is it, okay? They took a piece of copper and literally laid it across that circuit trace right there and wrapped it around here a little bit. And they took a piece of copper here and put it back on that circuit trace and wrapped it around that stud a little bit. That is your redesign. Underneath this stud right here, underneath the plastic, this piece of copper right here, It's exactly like that. It doesn't touch. As you can see on this end and over here, again, it doesn't touch. Over here, it doesn't touch. So is that a redesign? No, not even close. These two-phase buses, they are somewhat improved. That one is still as weak as ever and is still there. At least this had a brass ring over there that would connect up to the underside of the logic board to reinforce the battery plus bus. But as you can see, it's not reinforced here and it's not reinforced either. So this is not a redesign. This is called spin marketing, where they say they have redesigned things top to bottom when in fact they've done nearly nothing. All right, here is the middle power stage. Wow, maybe this one is a redesign. Nope, it's not. All right. So they did have to shift the MOSFETs over to make that fit, because you can see that that ring is much smaller than this. So they had to shift the MOSFETs that way to make that work. And because this one is bigger as well, they had to split the filter caps up. So, wow, that's a super duper redesign there, Christopher. Man, oh man, I get it. Yeah, you're right. This is a total redesign, top to bottom. Wow. They did use these things, so I guess that's a redesign, right? You know, but everything here is completely extraneous. This middle power stage is a waste of time. It's stupid. It's dumb. It's a bad design. It's even worse than the main power stage is. And I'll talk about that next. So, yeah, this is... Never do that, folks. Never do that. It's bad. All right, so let me go back over to Chris's tome. Over here so that I'm actually looking at it. There we go. And now I'm going to move the camera over to here. So we're looking at this stuff. Yep. And zoom back out again. All right. So Christopher quickly says his number one point is, yes, it's called a heat spreader, ... Technically, the fins on the other case are a heat exchanger / radiator. No, Christopher, you're wrong. That's called a heat sink. The bottom side of the main power stage, it has thermal paste on it, and the back side of the thing, this metal core printed circuit board, which is a slab of aluminum, this is categorically a heat spreader on there. It has no fins on it. It has no way to radiate heat anywhere other than across its flat surface, and of course this is inside dead air space, like it should be. And the thing is all that thermal paste, it has thermal conductivity so that it can transfer heat to an actual heatsink, of which you are looking at 3 heat sinks for motors in the background. Notice the fins on them. All right, so here is the KO Moto Rush shell. Notice the fins on it. Air flows over this. It's able through conduction and through convection to take heat away from here and dump it into the air. Hence that term heat sink, because the air is supposedly cooler than this is. So this is hot, the air is cooler, so heat is able to sink away to the air, aka heat sink. So this is a heat sink. This is not a something else. It's not a radiator. So radiators are the thing that you have in your car that's full of liquid. All right. So it is not an exchanger either. Again, those have fluid or oil of some kind in them. This is not a heat exchanger. I guess it is technically, because it does exchange heat with air. So then, let's look at a couple of examples of heat spreaders, because I have a few. You know, electronics is kind of my thing. I definitely like electronics. This is a controller I blew up. It was 24 FET. You can still see the Kapton insulator on that side. The other side's long since fallen off. Who cares? I just kept the heat spreader. But do you see fins on here? That's a question. Do you see fins on here? No, you don't. It's just a hunk of extruded aluminum with holes drilled in it to mount MOSFETs to. You mount this to a heatsink. This is not a heatsink. Here we go. Here's one for 12 FETs. Do you see fins on there anywhere? I sure don't. That's a question. Do you see fins on here for radiating heat away to the air? Do you see fins on here for radiating heat away to the air? No, you don't. The reason why is because these are heat spreaders. They are not heat sinks. They are not heat exchangers or something else. They have a very specific electronics term called heat spreader. This, if you'll notice, and I asked the question, I didn't say it needed them. I asked the question, do you see fins on here? I did not state it needed them. I asked the question, do you see them? And as you can see, it has none on it. And the reason why is because that nice big block of aluminum is once again a heat spreader. It takes the heat from the MOSFETs and it spreads the heat out everywhere. Same as this does, same as this does, just different shapes of the same function out of aluminum. It just spreads the heat out. That's all it does, hence the name heat spreader. So Christopher, no, that is not a heat sink. It is a heat spreader. It is not an exchanger. It's not a radiator. It's nothing else. That's just Christopher spin. That's all that is, trying to confuse terms together so that he doesn't look like a complete idiot after he's already made himself look like a complete idiot. So then, you have seen a heat sink. Let's look at another heat sink. You've seen that one. All right. I have several. Here's a heat sink. Notice the fins on it. You take something that's warm and stick it on this side, and through convection, through airflow, the heat is radiated off into the air from here, hence the term heat sink. Notice the fins. All right, let's look at another heat sink. This is actually on a controller. So here we go. This is a fairly inexpensive Chinese controller, 18 FET. The MOSFETs are screwed down through their heat spreader inside there, and otherwise got all these fins on it so that convection, airflow can happen, because the shell of this controller is the heat sink. Just like this is the heat sink. This is not a heat sink, it's not a heat exchanger, it's nothing other than the technical term is a heat spreader. So Christopher, stop sounding like a complete idiot, use the right terms, call things what they are. This is a heat spreader, and that's exactly what it is. Every other term, every other spin you want to put on it is wrong, wrong, wrong. This is a heat sink, period. Every other term you try to use, radiator, heat exchanger, blah, 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 Christopher, you just sound like an idiot. So stop. All right, let's move on to his next page. So that's basically his point one. Yeah, never said that you should put fins on the heat spreader on the middle stage. Never said that at all. Never suggested it. So yes, this paragraph is about it's far better being a solid block of aluminum, so there's more mass for that heat to sink into. Yeah, see, he still tries to misuse the terms so that you are confused into believing that what he says isn't stupid and moronic and idiotic. This is a heat spreader. The heat from the MOSFETs spreads throughout the aluminum, and this basically acts like a heat battery. All right, that's really what it's there for. To act like a heat battery so the heat has a place to go. That's what this is too. It's just a way to spread the heat from the MOSFETs into this piece of aluminum so that you can increase the surface area and then mount this to something like an actual heatsink. Like, oh, I don't know, this. But this power stage right here, well, it has no heatsink. Not much of one anyway. Okay, so here is the inside of the shell. You can see those shoulders right there, and you can see the screw holes in here that this aluminum screws down to and lands on the shoulders. So if I drop this into place in here, like that, now it's inside dead airspace. Yeah, his next statement is equally fallacious and stupid. Yeah, there is no convection going to happen here. There is no point for having fins on there because, well, it's in dead airspace. No airflow is going to happen through that middle stage anyway. So Christopher, once again, you look like a complete idiot. Yeah, this could have some heat sinking to it, but it doesn't. And how you would do that is you would put thermal paste on these shoulders here and here, and then that way this edge here and here could transfer some heat fairly well to the heat sink. So the heat spreader would at least be able to transfer heat through these edges right here to the heat sink. The heat spreader, that's that aluminum plate, would transfer heat to the heat sink if there was thermal paste here. As it is, however, it has a very poor thermal path just sitting in there like that. So yeah, all that's going to happen that's going to act like a heat battery. This chunk of aluminum on here, it's going to get hot, and that's it. It has no place to send its heat because it doesn't have any fins because it's not a heat sink. It is a heat spreader, and it doesn't have a very good thermal path to the actual heat sink to get rid of heat. So Chris, use the right terms. Quit spinning all your nonsense because it doesn't work. All you do is make yourself look like an idiot again. All right. So he says this is all part of the game. Pick what we say or what anyone says that disagrees. Pick it apart, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Yeah, make it sound academic. He calls my milliometer a multimeter. So here you go, folks. Let me show it to you. What's it say on there? Milliohm meter. Let me open the cover. What's it say right there? Milliohm meter. Okay, here is one of the many multimeters that I own. This is a multimeter. What does it do? It measures lots of stuff. It doesn't just measure extremely low resistances like a milliohm meter only does. This can measure voltage, it can measure current, it can measure some capacitance to a little bit, and diodes and other things like that. Hence the name multimeter. Again, Christopher, you sound like an idiot. This is a multimeter. This is a milliohm meter because all it does is measure extremely low resistances. This measures lots of stuff. So, Christopher, once again, you are an idiot. This is not a multimeter. It was on camera for 15, 20 minutes at least. You could see it says milliohm meter on it. The shell says milliohm meter on it. You sound like a moron, dude, because you are. Yeah, multimeter, my ass. Yeah, this is not smoke and mirrors. That's the next thing he says. First of all, he calls it a multimeter, and then he says it's all smoke and mirrors. Sorry, folks. These kind of devices, very specialized devices, are things that people that work with electronics all the time will have. This one isn't a really good one. You can spend $1,400 on a milliohm meter, and I can't afford that. So I have a much less expensive one, but nevertheless, it's a specialized piece of equipment that people that work with electronics will have and use on a regular basis, and so do I. So anyway, milliohm meter, a very specialized piece of measuring equipment that is designed specifically for measuring very low resistances. Yeah, not a multimeter, Christopher. Certainly not smoke and mirrors. The meter reads what the meter reads. And it clearly shows that your power stages suck and that the X9000 power stage does not. Literally, whatever it was, 29 times worse on one of these than it is on the X9000. The meter doesn't lie, it just records what it records, period. Smoke and mirrors, not likely. Yeah. And then he has the temerity to call the EBMX dyno test a basement dyno test. Christopher, I think you should go watch that video again because it very distinctly and clearly shows a professionally made dyno, not something that even I would make. That would probably be more DIY. It shows something that's a very expensive piece of test equipment, a professionally manufactured piece of test equipment. Yeah, sorry, not a basement dyno in any way, shape, or form. More spin from Christopher, and that's all that is. Yeah, finally we get to the second point about the plastic case. Yep, sure enough, at least he tells the truth on that. That is the same plastic piece that's on all their controllers. Of course it is. I already said that. I didn't even disagree with them. All he's doing is just repeating what I say. Yeah, don't even care. I think I'm about done. I really don't care much more. Oh yeah, so yeah, I mentioned about the amperage of the MOSFETs. These are more powerful MOSFETs than the ones that are in the X9000. They are. But because this is such a lossy power stage, and you just multiplied it times 2 for the rush, the X9000 is still going to outperform this. It's got weaker MOSFETs. Sure it does. They don't have as much amperage rating on them. They don't. But still, because it's got so much better thermal characteristics, has so fewer losses when it comes to resistive and inductive losses, It's going to outperform this. I don't care that you have 48 much more powerful MOSFETs in here. This is still going to be worse, still going to be lower power than the X9000 is. Duh. I mean, you have so much losses in here. You have so much inductive losses. You have so much resistive losses. You have a power stage in here that can't conduct its heat away. And you have another one here that's the same dregs and steaming turd that's in the Pro/F spec. So no, it's not going to perform as well as the X9000. It can't. The X9000 is going to outperform this because it's so much better. So Christopher, yes, you have more powerful MOSFETs. You could do this better. You could listen to me. I offered to help you with that even, and you refused me. So yeah, live with your shitty design. You have wasted your time with this. You have made a bad design. Reliability is going to be poor. Everything about this is crappy, crappy, crappy. Buy an X9000, folks, before you buy a Rush. It's a far superior controller, and it's going to outperform this every day of the year. And if it does get hot, you know what? Put a water block on there. You can, but you can't do that with this. And you'll still have this, you'll still have this in the middle that can't conduct heat away. So this is still a shoddy, bad design. This still can't perform as well as the X9000. Buy an X9000, folks. Don't buy this. Don't listen to Chris's spin. It's more nonsense.